Hey, welcome to episode 703 of today's Antidote. And today we're going to talk about our discoveries after a week of discussion surrounding scary situations. Let me tell you, I learned a lot about those scary situations and I've made a really big discovery. So think about what you might have discovered if you were listening or watching us, and we'll talk about it after this short introduction. All that and more on today's Antidote.
Stay tuned for today's Antidote, brought to you by the Renegade Success Network. Today's Antidote features a healthy dose of thought-provoking insights and information for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and nonprofit professionals. Each day since March of 2020, this program has offered that one thing to help you continue on your own unique pathway to success. And now, Renegades, we bring you Bob Graham and Tom Brush.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing today, Bob? Good morning.
I'm good because I made a discovery just now. It's hard to believe, but we've actually done 703 episodes. And I realized today that the mute button actually turns off when you hit a certain point. So if I actually pay attention to that and don't do my dent until after the mute button goes off, I will actually get it right because sometimes I rush it. Does that make sense?
You mean that when the intro is playing, you're muted?
Correct. Automatically. Sometimes I want to unmute myself and give commentary, but I've fought the urge so far.
It's a good discovery. I think I found that out a few hundred episodes ago. I could have shared that with you. I guess I thought you knew that.
Nope. I knew I was muted, but I didn't know that it turned itself off and that I could watch for that, and that would be a cue.
Got it.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So there you go. You learn something new every day.
Another discovery. It's amazing the things we discover during the week if we stop.
How do I disappear like that so easily?
What?
I'm literally in there. There's nothing. I'm not moving around more than like 3 inches, and I'm.
It's a good trick.
There are plenty of people who wish that I did disappear.
And if they're listening to the podcast, they're not really sure what you're talking about because we don't appear or disappear on the podcast. So.
Oh, we disappear on podcasts all the time. Trust me.
Anyhow, all right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Friday's edition of Today's Antidote, our daily broadcast and podcast, as we have conversations throughout the week around a certain topic. As Bob discussed, we were talking about scary situations this week. And on Fridays, we always share our discoveries of the week, those things that new value that we've discovered that'll have an impact on our knowledge, experience, and perspective. And as we go through that conversation, if you have thoughts or ideas that you'd like to share your own discovery, please feel free to put it in the comments because we know that it'll add value to our show. Whether you happen to be watching us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or
LinkedIn Live, baby, on a Friday.
Yes, LinkedIn Live on a Friday, baby. So, we also would encourage you to share your discovery of the week inside our Facebook group and our LinkedIn group. We'll talk more about that at the end of the show, I think. Anyhow, we're going to keep moving forward. And before we dive into our conversation, though, we always start our morning off with celebrations. Bob, do you want to share with everyone, just remind them why we start with celebrations?
I would love to, Tom. It's one of my favorite things. It's one of the things that you really brought to the table probably 2 years ago, and it's made a big difference for me. We celebrate to, I think, do a couple of things. One, to recognize the steps we take, because we're all building something unique, and sometimes we get bogged down, worried about the results. And when we celebrate the step we took, so you had a bad meeting, but you had the meeting. Or you blew a phone call, but you made the phone call and you can learn from it. So the celebration is often around, hey, I made the phone call. It didn't go the way I was expecting, but I did make the call and that was progress for me. Or I was talking to someone the other day and they gave a presentation and they were scared to death to do it. And they did it and they said it was horrible. They were shaking the whole time. But I said to them afterwards, now what would you do differently next time? Oh, I wouldn't have word for word notes. I'd do this, I'd do this, I'd do this. Okay, you're already on your way to the next step. So we celebrate those steps we take. So I said to that person, I'm really excited for you that you did it, because the first time you present is the hardest. It gets easier, you learn every time, and you're constantly learning. So those celebrations do that. I think they also get us in a positive mindset to go forward and do even more complex things, more challenging things, because I know my brain's starting to get wired around the idea that do something, celebrate, do something, celebrate. And I like the reward system. It really does motivate me. And it's as simple as I'm going to go play my guitar for 10 minutes, or I'm going to go out and read for 15 minutes, or I'm going to binge watch an episode of a TV show tonight that I've been dying to watch, and I'm going to make sure I stop work at 4:30 so I can do it before my evening. It doesn't have to be like a trip to the Bahamas or a new car. It could be something as simple as what for you, it's a milkshake of some sort, right? Or
sometimes, yeah.
Right. So we celebrate the steps we take. So, and I think we also celebrate things that we're grateful for in our life too. I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of what we celebrate. There's often things that, I'm grateful that this organization wants me to work with them. I'm grateful for these things. So does that sort of explain it?
Yeah, it does. And I think it's also that it's really easy for us to beat ourselves up, which is interesting because, of course, the first two things you talked about were a horrible meeting and a blown call. And, and I think that's the way we look at it, rather than just saying I had a meeting and not judge it, and I had a phone call again and not judge it. Just try to figure out, what do I learn from it? So that taking the time to celebrate the action hopefully helps us stay further away from the judgment and more towards the, how can I learn from what actions I took?
Okay.
So given that, what are you celebrating today, Bob?
So I'm celebrating something I did last night that I was very concerned about. I have a person in my life now, and this person's a really good advisor, and I showed them something I wrote. And I've shown people thousands of things, thousands upon thousands of things, but this was awkward because of a lot of situations, and there was some feedback that could come, and it could be negative or it could be positive.
Or it could be feedback.
And so I'm recognizing, for me, I see what you did there, that I took this step to get this feedback from a person that I don't think expected me to ask for that kind of feedback. And the feedback that I got was actually far more valuable than I was expecting. I was expecting a good result, but it was even greater than I expected. And it was something I wrote, and the person actually added a really good item to it. Just a very subtle thing that was like, oh, wow, you really paid attention. So sometimes when we do things and we want feedback, we're afraid to show it to people, especially people that we care about. But that feedback was so incredibly valuable to what I'm trying to accomplish.
And the feedback is just judgment by someone else. Or we judge their feedback.
Or maybe not judgment, maybe just input. Hey,
well, that's the thing, right?
Like this person laughed at several places where I was trying to be funny in this thing I wrote. And they laughed. They're like, oh, that's funny. And so it was like, oh, okay, this really does work humorously. So
at least with one person.
Wow.
It's just all feedback.
Tough.
No, well, I just think that's, to me, the more that I think that way, the less I get into positive, negative, judging myself, judging the reactions I get, because I just think those things keep us stuck and frustrated.
I would agree with that. I'm working through it, Tom. It's a work in progress.
I know. We're 703 episodes into a work in progress for both of us.
I think some would argue it's me, not you, but
you never know.
So Excellent. What are you celebrating?
So I'm celebrating. Actually, I just peeked at my phone earlier, and because I was wondering about the weather for this weekend, because as I've mentioned a few times on the show, we have a large women's lacrosse event this weekend that I'll be officiating, and I was assigning. And it looks like the weather is going to be beautiful. It's going to be low 70s. The sun's going to be out on Saturday, some clouds on Sunday. And now Sunday, they're not calling for some of the rain that they weren't. So I'm celebrating the fact that we are going to have, I think, a great fall weekend for this weekend, which will be nice.
Okay, nice. I saw an article. They're worried about the New York Marathon on Sunday because it's going to get in the high 70s, and that's really tough. It'll be 40 when they start and 70 by 10:30, and that's really bad marathon running weather for the mortals that try it, because first you're shedding clothes like crazy, and second, 70 degrees feels like 90 when you run. So that,
yeah, especially if you're at the end of 26.3 miles.
26.2. No one's going that extra 10th.
Well, although they usually start, because of the numbers.
Oh,
they don't
that's a good
start
point.
at the start line, even though they probably start their watches at the start line.
And the official clock at the start line, yes.
Most of those people, I shouldn't say most, many of those people will go running before they run a marathon to loosen up.
Yes. I never understood that.
Yeah. Let me go out and run 3 miles so that before I go run 26.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Me, I'm thinking, let me go out and think about running 26 and I'll run 3.
Yeah, there we go. I like that. All right. So let's dive into our topic this morning. All week, because of Halloween and because it's the end of the calendar year. And I think that's sometimes when some of these scary situations pop up a little more than usual. We've been talking about scary situations all week. We talked about money. We talked about overwhelm. We talked about delivering your services. We talked about thinking how to price your services. So with all of those conversations, do you have some thoughts or ideas around that, Bob?
I do. I have an overarching thought that hit me last night as I was thinking about what we would talk about today. And that is that all of those things are scary when you think of them big picture. Pricing, if I price it this way, I could blah, 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 and it's going to have tax implications, or they're not going to take me, or whatever. And overwhelm. I've got so much to do. I can't manage it. But if you break it down to just very discrete, small steps, it's not as scary. So I'm working on something, and I just was like, I was starting to get overwhelmed by it. It's just like, this is getting really complicated. This is really not going the way I want it to go. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this simple process. What's the next thing I need to do? That's all I'm going to worry about. And that's what I did. And then before I knew it, I was like 4 steps down the road, and I was no longer scared by it because I had 4 steps, and I think you build traction and momentum, and next thing you know, you're rolling down the road. So I think what I've really discovered is that those scary situations are kind of a facade, or they're real when I think about big things like, I've got to make X number of dollars this year, or if I don't double my client base, I'll be out of business in 3 months. Okay, I can't, like you say all the time, I can't control all those factors. What I can control is, am I going to hop on LinkedIn today and make some connections? Am I going to follow up with people? Am I going to make a couple of calls when I have time? Am I going to go to networking events? Am I going to present myself professionally? Those are the things I can control. And I think so often we want to blame other things for our lack of accomplishment. Sorry. When in fact, it's the small steps we have to take.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that's one of the things I was thinking about all week is having a plan. I think sometimes we're into scary situations when we don't have a plan because we're not sure of what the next step is, or we're uncertain of it. And so we tend to now start to judge, well, is that the correct next step, or is it should I be maybe doing something different? I mean, it's easy to get into those other thoughts that take us away from continuing to take whatever the next step is. And I think, if you've laid out, here's the plan and here are the steps I believe is going to get me to where I want to go, it's a lot less scary because you at least have an idea. Now, things can always, and they will, pop up and there will be obstacles that'll show up. There'll also be new opportunities that arise as you go through it. And yet I think it still allows us to feel like, okay, I can see the pathway. It's not just I'm stepping into the forest and I have no idea. It's I can see it. It maybe right now looks straighter than I think it will be, or than I know it will likely be. And that's okay, because at least I can see the pathway to where I want to go. I think it's when we don't have that and we just say, okay, we're trying to get to here. And then we blindly set out. And it's easy then to be like, okay, well, every step we have to stop and think about what's the next one, rather than taking the time to say, okay, I know what I believe the next one is. Once I measure and evaluate this one, I at least have a pathway. Even if if I didn't get feedback that I need to make changes, I could be like, okay, let's take the next one and keep taking those steps until we get some feedback that says, maybe there's other options for us to consider. And I think so often that's the point, is we set out and say, I want to do this. We have those dreams, and yet we're not really certain how to get there.
And I also think we're in our own heads a lot with
Sure.
this stuff. You helped me a couple weeks ago walk through a process so that I could figure out some things I was trying to accomplish. And it was really helpful. And it wasn't anything that I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was just you brought it all together onto one whiteboard. And it was like 15 aha moments that I was driving home that night, and I'm like, I should have been able to think about this and come up with this. This is what I do, but you just can't. You're so close to it. And if you're on that path, you're not looking outside. You're just you have that tunnel vision. And I think it's a challenge for all of us. And I know, Tom, because you're always thinking ahead, you've got something that will help someone if they have a challenge with this coming up. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. Because I think one of the things is we have all these big dreams, or we have these big goals that we've set. And maybe they're for this year, or maybe they're for this week, or maybe they're for the next quarter. And yet we haven't really sat down and considered, okay, how are we going to get there? What are the steps that we're going to take? We can dream a lot about it. And what we want to do is help you stop just dreaming about it, actually achieve it. And so we're putting on a workshop on December 8th, Thursday, December 8th, here in Baltimore, Maryland. And it's a day-long workshop that we know is going to help you figure out how to stop dreaming, how to stop just dreaming about it and start taking action towards it and creating a pathway so that you can start to avoid some of those scary situations, at least the overwhelm one if I'm not sure what the next step is. So if you'd like more information about that all-day workshop, please feel free to reach out to Bob and I. It will be in person. So we'll welcome people to come in. It's at a hotel. So if you're coming from out of town and feel like you need a place to stay, I'm sure we can get you a good rate at that hotel. And we would love to see you there. We'll have more information about it. But private message Bob and I, or put in the comments Renegade, and we'll send you some information about this workshop. So thank you, Bob, for...
Yeah, no, we've been planning it, and we did a lot of planning on it a couple weeks ago. I was looking at my notes the other evening. I was going through my notebook, and they popped up, and it looks really exciting. It really does. I'm looking forward to it. No, I don't mean that in that way. I'm hoping, in fact, I've got to make the deal with you that you'll lead most of us, so I can actually participate, because I really enjoy the opportunity to look through those things.
Oh, I suppose I could do that.
I thought you might. Yeah. There you go.
Sure. Why not?
So, but I think it's been a great week of discussions. If you didn't catch any of these this week, I would tell you, I listened to Mondays and Wednesdays a second time, and I was really, we get into some issues that I hear a lot of people talking about. So if you're someone worrying about pricing, if you're worried about overwhelm, if you're worried about some of these other things, we dug into it pretty deep, and we were pretty honest. I don't think it was the usual, oh, it's going to be okay, don't worry about your pricing, blah, blah, blah. And also throughout the week, we gave a lot of suggestions.
Sure.
Embedded in there. So,
and I have one other, I have my discovery. I didn't really share my discovery. Share what I thought about. That's okay.
You are correct.
And I just thought about it this morning. when we were talking about feedback
Mhm.
and talking about positive and negative, and it just reminded me that both of those are just adjectives to describe it, that we have chosen to judge and describe a situation. And it struck me that scary is the same thing. That it
Oh,
is really just an adjective that we decide we are going to put on. It's just a situation that we have
okay.
the opportunity to be impacted by. If
Okay.
we can take the time to sort of go back and evaluate the situation, or again, if we have the next step, it's a little bit clearer about what to do when this happens. And so I think if, again, the less we start, the less we assign adjectives to situations, feedback, results, I think it keeps us from judgment. Because once you say scary, because the adjective always comes first, or almost always
Right.
comes first. And so now you set yourself up that it's scary. No matter what comes next. You set that up, this was good, or this was positive, or this was negative. So you've already set the tone of what it looks like. So how do you then, are you able to then focus on what comes next? You're worried about it being scary rather than focusing on the situation and what do I do? You're worried about the feedback. Was it positive or negative, rather than just thinking about feedback? And I think that so often, and that's a little bit of what you were talking about, it's in our head that we assign these judgments and then we choose an adjective, and that adjective almost always comes first, which is no wonder why we can get stuck, because we hear the adjective and hardly pay attention to what comes next.
Okay. Wow. Look at that. I'm afraid to speak now because I know I'll use an adjective.
Well, and again, I think that that's human nature, is that we do all those things. It's kind of like saying positive or negative,
Right.
or right or wrong. I
Good
think
or bad.
if you at least put that thought in your head and maybe think about the adjectives you use and how much impact the adjectives have on whatever it is you're looking at, because you're telling yourself this.
Mm-hmm.
And who do we trust sometimes, or we listen to more than anyone else? Ourselves. So if we're saying it's scary, positive, negative, good, bad, right, wrong, there's a good chance we're going to believe it a lot more. And again, that's just an opportunity for us to judge ourselves rather than to learn.
No, that makes sense. I like that. That was a good discovery. That might be one of the top 5 you've ever come up with, honestly.
I appreciate that.
So,
all right, everyone, if you have a discovery of the week, please feel free to put it in the comments, again, wherever you are paying attention to us. And we apologize to Facebook users. We apologize to podcast listeners, because there is no...
Can we apologize to Facebook?
We can. They may be looking for it every morning. So anyhow, if you're a podcast listener, there's no place to comment. So we would welcome you to join us in our 2 groups. If you're a LinkedIn person, go to the Renegade Success Network for Leaders on LinkedIn. If you're a Facebook person, you can go to the Ring of Renegades and join us inside of there and share your discoveries of the week about scary situations, or because there will be a post, so you can share it under that post. You can also share any other discovery that you had. It doesn't have to necessarily be around scary situations. It could be some aha moment that you had that you're like, you know what, this would be really interesting to share with others, because they might benefit from it, and it might be exactly the information that they need, the value that they need to help them figure out how to take their next step forward.
That happens a lot more than we realize, by the way, Tom. I get people who say, oh, I heard your broadcast the other day. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Or I saw a comment in there. It's so weird, because it's like that person was talking about exactly the same issue I was having.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way it goes. And the more we share that, the more we realize there are more of us out there thinking similarly and dealing with the same opportunities and obstacles that we are, and trying to figure out how to take that next step. So we look forward to seeing you inside of those groups and you sharing and receiving value as a part of it. If not, we will see you Monday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern time, for our next episode of today's antidote. Have a great day, everyone.
Hey, embrace the renegading you. It's worth it. And it's fallback time on Sunday. So set your clock back, which means you get an extra hour of sleep. That's right. Enjoy it. Do that extra hour on Sunday. What are you going to use it for? Some people sleep, other people, who knows? Do something renegade with that hour.
Yes.
Ooh.
And make sure you set your clock back if you have a traditional clock so that you're not here at what you believe is 7 on Monday looking for our show, and we won't be here for another hour.
Oh, maybe I'll get up and do a 6 o'clock version for the people that get it wrong. That would be fun.
The people who do it differently.
Differently.
Yeah.
Time challenged.
They just weren't aware. They didn't have that
My
knowledge.
favorite day to go to church.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh, you got here early. Oh, well, yeah.
I forgot to turn back my car clock.
That's it.
All right,
All right.
everyone. Go out and make it a great day. We will see you soon. Thanks for listening to today's antidote, powered by the Renegade Success Network. The Renegade Success Network helps you confidently create your own unique pathway to success. To learn more about the Renegade Success Network and how you can take your next step, follow us on Twitter, connect on LinkedIn, or join the Ring of Renegades Facebook group. For full details on how you can join our community, go to renegadesuccessnetwork.com. Embrace the renegade in you.